Leadership is hard, and I've got some good news and I've got some bad news for you. The bad news is that I can't make it any easier, but the good news is that we can work on it together to get better. And you want to know the secret? Who you are comes before what you do. It's form before function. So let's get to work together. I'm Preston Poore, and this is PQ. Today's guest has spent his career helping others find the intersection between their faith and work. He's led organizations through transitions, developed leaders, and guided countless professionals to discover deeper meaning in what they do. As the managing partner of RKE Partners and the founder of the VOCA Center, he's been a beacon for those navigating career changes and leadership challenges. Additionally, he directs the New York City branch of the New Canaan Society in Manhattan, where he fosters connections among men seeking to grow in both their faith and leadership. With a wealth of experience and insight, he's here to share his journey and his wisdom with us. Please help me welcome to the show, Dr. Chip Roper. Welcome, Chip. How are you?
Doing well, Preston. It's great to be here.
Good to have you today. Thanks for being part of the podcast on it. I know you didn't know that I was going to go here real quick, but I want to talk a little bit about how you and I met before we questions.
On Earthquake Tuesday or whatever it was.
What do they call that in New York now? It's kind of like it's a memorable experience, right? Where were you type thing? Do you remember that?
Sorry, it actually doesn't reach that level. It's all just been expunged from our memory with many other things.
I love it. I tell people, the way I set it up when I tell people I met you is that you and I are sitting in a hotel off of Central Park. You were kind enough to come have coffee with me and do some networking. And we're sitting there, and I feel some rumbling under my feet at the hotel. The table's shaking a little bit, my coffee in my hand shaking, and I'm thinking, okay, well, that's a subway or something, but I didn't think a subway went right under us. And Chip, I share the story that you literally didn't budge. I mean, you just looked straight ahead at me, kept engaged in the conversation, And then as we part our ways, I go upstairs, and my wife and my daughter are waiting on me to go walk around New York City like we would. And I said, "Did you feel that rumbling?" And Caroline, my daughter, looks down. She gets a text and says, "Earthquake."
Yeah.
And so it was I guess the largest earthquake in the Northeast for 250 years or something crazy, whatever the number was on that.
Now, I was with you. I assumed it was a train, and there's trains everywhere. So it's just like, yeah, it's a train.
Yeah.
And there's underground facilities just about everywhere. So I just assumed that. I have a daughter that lives in Southern California, and there was just an earthquake out there.
Yeah.
And ours was bigger on the Richter scale.
Really?
But yeah, people don't talk about it very much anymore.
Yeah,
so.
it's not as big of a deal. It was that day though.
It was.
Yeah,
It's kind of seemed
interesting
fortuitous, on Earthquake Day.
Yeah,
So.
I tell you what. So I tell people, Chip, meeting my friend Chip, Dr. Chip Roper, it was literally a moving experience. That's my punchline on it.
That's good. That's good.
Hey, so getting to know you, I appreciate your story, but there's I think a tipping point for you, a turning point in your career, and you were a pastor, and then there was a point that something happened. You said you clearly remember that. Take us there that day, as you clearly remember what was happening, and what did you discover?
Yeah, I think some of the headlines of my career journey, I started out in business, and then I pivoted. I went to the seminary, became a pastor. I did that for 20 years, and then I pivoted again and ended up doing what I'm doing now. And towards the tail end of that pastoral tenure, I remember it was a summer Sunday. And for those of you who have never worked in the church world, the summer is actually a terrible time to be a pastor because everybody's on vacation. Like, it just is not fun when everybody's away. And so you should never really count the summer data. But anyway, this is a little deeper. We just got done church, and I just had this feeling like I can't keep doing this. And this is what was hitting me. So on that particular Sunday, I was preaching, which is normal. I was also playing the keyboard in the worship band, which I did every now and then. And my wife was singing in the worship band. One of my daughters was playing guitar. A second daughter was playing the drums. And our third and final daughter in count, actually the oldest, was doing the sound. And I thought, we're becoming the Van Trapp family singers or the Partridge Family or something. And Yeah, we're keeping this thing going all on our own. And that's not really true. You know, there's a bunch of wonderful people there and volunteers and everything, but it just felt like um we're just not building enough critical mass to see this thing kind of take care of itself. And that's the way it felt. And it was just a moment, you know, in a drama script they call it a beat. It was like a beat. It was like there's something's got to change. So I don't think I can do this forever, you know, was so that yeah, that's the moment.
So thank you for sharing that. So you made this transition into where you are now. We'll talk about that in a minute. But what led you? Because you said you moved from business to the ministry to business. So what called you into the ministry out of business? First of all.
So when I started out, I mean, I started thinking business when I was in high school. I started my first company when I was like 19. Um, and what the thing that was happening at the same time is I'd basically kind of rejected the faith foundations that I've been raised with. And so I looked at business as a way to make money as quickly as I could and to basically you know, if you own your business, your own business and you're successful, you can kind of write your own ticket, you know. You can kind of go anywhere, you can do anything you want. And at least that's the way I looked at it. And so that was all about me. It wasn't about adding value. It wasn't about for customers or employees. It was not about service, uh, except for serving myself. And um, so that's the way I was kind of running and rolling. And you know, so a bunch of things were going on in my life, and I was forced to recognize that my wa- my value system wasn't actually making me happy. You know, the all about chip, get ahead, do whatever it takes, kind of combine the business I'm running with getting a degree and other things. Yeah, I was miserable, and the people around me were miserable. And as I faced that, it led me into a period of spiritual seeking, and I felt like I don't know. I mean, I felt like I really met some great people growing up in church, but I also felt like it was sort of an intellectual faith and a cultural faith, but it wasn't an experiential faith. And so I went through a period, and I've interviewed and talked to so many peers that have done the same thing. I went through a period of praying, God, if you're real, show me. And I mean, He did. And so it wasn't like a moment. I didn't have a Apostle Paul get knocked off your horse, single, you know, dot on the calendar kind
Yes,
of
sir.
thing. But over a period of time, I became convinced that Jesus was who He said He was, and that changes everything um, for me. So then that led me to like sort of that took a year, and then a second phase of that was well, you know, my whole career since my since 16 years since age 15 or 16 was all about I was deciding how I was going to get ahead in the world. And I realized I hadn't really prayed about what I should do with my life. I'd never sought God for His wisdom or direction of what I should do with my life. And I started to do that, and simultaneously, you know, people around me. Um, well, here's a young guy who's passionate about his faith, and I guess has some leadership potential. He should be a pastor. You know, that's the counsel I received.
Really? Okay.
And so that was kind of when was that? It was like it was like late 80s. And I mean, to be honest, nobody was talking at that time like you could really serve God as a business person, or you could, you know, like people didn't talk that way in my circles anyway. They did. It was kind of like if you were really serious about your faith, you became a pastor
It's
or a
kind of either
missionary.
or, right? I mean, so
Missionary,
yeah.
and you know, it's funny because I don't encourage that way of thinking these days, but so that's how that happened, and I was lining things up to go to Wharton and get an MBA, and you know, with all this counsel and all this praying, I took a hard right turn and went to seminary, um, and that's how I became a pastor.
Wow. Okay. And so how long did you spend as a pastor?
20 years.
20 years. Okay. And where were you living at the time with your family?
We lived outside of Philadelphia, the western suburbs of Philadelphia.
Okay. And so you're in Philly, and then you make this, I guess, this change, right? And say, okay, I'm on the ministry chapter of my life. I'm being called into something different. Were you in Philly at the time?
Yes.
Okay, and so to walk me through the decision-making process in that, I loved your wife was involved, and certainly in all of this in your family, and how you made some decisions and what life was like when you moved to New York City.
Well, I think one of the first things, and this is to make sure it's real. The restlessness is real. It's not just temporary. Um, there is a interesting verse in Deuteronomy that one of my mentors pointed out to me. It's like a mother eagle stirs the nest and pushes her chicks out of the nest, and he was saying, "Are you being really pushed out of the nest, kind of the comfort zone of where you've been, or are you just, you're just grumpy and discontent because we all get that way. Some, at least I do, on a fairly regular basis. And so there's a period of several years where, quite a few actually, 3 or 4, where first individually and then working with our board at the church, we just tried to figure out what is this? Can I re-engineer my job? Can I in ways that help me and the church, not just for me. That's no good. It's got to be a win-win. Um, and we did do some things actually for a while that were really good. And another issue was just issues with staff. And I was a pretty decent upfront leader by instinct, but I was a terrible manager by instinct. So, I worked through a lot of that stuff. I worked through a lot of that stuff. People were gracious and patient with me as I kind of figured some of those things out. And so I guess the first answer to that question, Preston, is like try and stay. As I tried to stay, and work through it, and and I think I'm really grateful that I did, and I'm grateful for the patience that people showed with me as I learned things and trying to figure all that stuff out. So,
Right.
so when it became apparent, then it became apparent, like, and this was a discussion with Audrey, Audrey's my wife, and I just like, well, we're ready for the next thing, um, and we'll take it when it comes along.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, we're gonna raise our family here, serve here, do all that. We're gonna be all in here until the next thing, until it's obvious. And so one principle is, make sure you've done everything you can to make your current situation work. And that you're not just having a bad day or even a bad year and just running off to, grass is greener, other side of the fence type of thing. Seth Godin's book, The Dip,
Okay.
talks all about that. It's really good. So the first idea was don't leave too early. Like make sure you've really sussed this out and explored it. And the second idea came to me was just that part of leading well is leaving well. And I was at the same church for 20 years. We started with 8 people. It's around 350 when I left. So I'd really poured heart and soul into this thing, and I was I loved the people there, and they loved me, and just running out the door because I feel like I'm done and I want to get to the next thing would have been unloving to them, and part of it would be a sign of unfaithfulness. So I think part of leading well is leaving well, which means getting everything is in order as much as you can, and really doing a good handoff.
That's right.
And so I was looking for a scenario that would meet that criteria,
Mhm.
and one came along in 2013, which was year 19, and it was the opportunity to merge with a larger church, um, which did have when you merge, that there's a huge cultural shift. There's no way around that, and so
Sure.
that can be hard for those who stay. On the other hand, in terms of seeing the vision carrying on and having sort of avoiding some of the financial challenges that usually happen when a founder kind of leaves, all that stuff was taken care of. So there were some really good things about that. So part of the leaving was having an exit that would be good for the or good for the church. So that came about. So that was part of that process. Um, and then, as that conversation about merging unfolded, it became clear that it was going to happen. This was going to be the end of my tenure there. And I needed to figure out what was next. People want to know, what are you going to do next? And including me, I wanted to know what I was going to do next.
Sure.
And I mean, we lived outside of Philadelphia and in the suburbs, and had grown up in the suburbs, the far suburbs, exurbs, both of us. And our kids had grown up there. And I had always kind of been enthralled with cities. And so I had a passion for cities, and I always wanted kind of a dream, maybe bucket list kind of item, sort of. Yeah, it's a little bit bigger than a bucket list, but yeah, I want to live in a city sometime. I want to try that
Sure.
if we can. And Audrey was open to that. That's not something she really um, wanted, and like she didn't wake up in the morning and say, "I want to live in a city," but she was open to it at this stage in our lives. We were open to a change. We both were feeling restless for a long time for different reasons, and I was talking with a friend who was helped us process the merger, and he said, "What are you going to do?" Like everybody's like saying, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." And he said, "Well, you're more excited about New York City than you are about anything, and so maybe you ought to start looking there." And I mean, it just felt like wise counsel. It's like we do this when we work with clients who are exploring new options. Like if it's unbounded and you could just do anything, that's really difficult to
Yeah.
organize, and almost impossible. It's kind of the idea that you can. It's almost the boil the ocean fallacy. Like you just can't do everything. You've got to put boundaries on this, like an industry, a location, or something. So as we entered into this transition, we started with a geographic boundary. Um, we want to be able to live and work in New York City, and I honestly didn't care what I did here. I mean, it didn't really matter. I looked at my history and things I've done and my abilities, which I, worked through with coaches and so forth. And it was a range of possibilities of things I could do. I could, I could start a church. I could be a staff pastor somewhere. I could work for a Christian nonprofit. I could work for a regular nonprofit, or I thought I could do management consulting. And I worked with a coach, and we worked through a strategy, and really, it's a terrible elevator pitch. Hey, I'm moving to New York, and I could do one of five things. Who should I talk to?
Share with me real quick. I thought it was fun to hear the story about your family moving from the suburbs into a small arrangement in the city, right? New York City. What were the challenges and the changes and the benefits for you? I think that you share some great stuff on that.
Well, I was networking for a job, and what I found in my networking process, I did end up getting an opportunity here that led to the birth of VOCA and everything
Yeah.
that we're talking about. Um, but I also, as I was networking, I was talking to people who lived and worked in New York City and with a family, and I was curious about how they did that. So I learned a lot, and because the reality for us is we have three daughters, and one was already a freshman in college when we moved, so we had two in high school. We were moving from a house that was about 3,000 square feet, where everybody had their own room, and Audrey and I each had our own office, in addition to like a family room and a living room and a dining area. Like it was like we were coming from a shed, a garage. We had lots and lots of space, which is very very normal to all you suburbanites out there. But in New York, we were moving into a 1,100 square foot apartment, which was considered large, and without like any extra rooms. All the girls would share a bedroom, and we would have a bedroom, and we'd have a large, kind of great room. Large. I'm putting that in rabbit ears
Love it.
area where we, your living room, dining room, kitchen,
Yeah.
all in one. And so we're basically shaving 2/3 off our square footage footprint. Um, we're going from three cars to one. We even had to offload a pet in the process. We kept three
How'd
of
you
the
make that
four.
decision? That's nice, right? So you got to upload a pet. How do you choose amongst your pets? I won't take you down
Well,
that
we had
path.
a
That's a great question.
the neurotic dog just could not handle New York. We knew it and wasn't going to
Okay,
happen.
there
So,
you go.
so there's just no way she would handle the elevator every day. So, or people in it. So I mean, that's what we did. And couple tips people said that were really helpful. So one, they just said it's going to be crazy at first, but you're actually going to get closer as a family because you're physically closer. You can't go hide in your room, kind of thing. And that was true. Um, our two daughters, that as when once we moved here, those two really became close, much closer than they were before we moved. Um, the other second idea is just that the city is your kind of living room in your yard. It's not you can't think of the kind of suburban mindset is you want to have everything you need on your property,
Mhm.
and we did all that. Like we had everything. Like we had three cars, and we had our bikes, and we had a generator and a pressure washer and a snowblower and a chainsaw. Like we had everything. Like we were self sufficient and we could live without power for a week. at least. And but that's not, you can't do that in the city. That's not the way the city works. In the city, you share everything. And, like we have a beautiful roof deck on our building. It's an acre, and you sit there and watch the sunset over Manhattan. Nobody's hardly anybody's ever there. And it's like, but it's not ours. It's not even ours to,
Right.
but it doesn't matter, and it's still wonderful and we still enjoy it. And, there's parks, including Central Park, which is one of our favorite places now. So that's your yard, and you just change your mindset. And when you get out and you use the city and you take advantage of it, you don't feel claustrophobic. You don't feel like your s- your life has been reduced. In fact, you feel like it's been expanded. So I think those are a couple of tips. And I mean, the other thing that's interesting, and people don't tell you this if you move to the suburbs, but when they move to New York, people are like, "Yeah, it's great, and you need to get out of there on a regular basis, because if you stay there all the time, 12 months, 365 days a year, you're going to go crazy." So you got
Yeah.
to get out. You got to get out into the green, out into the woods. And one of the things that has been surprising about New York City is just how quickly you can get to nature.
Mm,
And there's Central Park, which you're very familiar with, but
sure.
like an hour north of the city and an hour outside the city, it's like there's amazing hiking and mountains and water, and it's pretty wild how quickly you can get out of the intensity of New York City into really peaceful nature settings, and then get back. And so
Yeah.
so we've been taking advantage of that.
That's awesome. Thank you. That's, my daughter, Caroline and Foley moved to New York City about a year and a half ago now and live up there. And two things that she would say and has told me that you have to leave New York to love New York. And so what she means by that, I guess that's a phrase she picked on, but or picked up, and kind of like you've got to get out into nature or get out somewhere else and go. And she takes advantage of the opportunity to go fly and visit friends and stuff like that. So that's really good. The other thing that Caroline observed, which I have too, I have a Coke. When I worked for the Coca-Cola company, New York City's been my territory off and on for a number of years, and but it's how kind the people are. Caroline shares stories with me like people will help each other with strollers getting on and off of subways, that kind of stuff. And you wouldn't have that initial impression living in New York, being on the outside looking in. You'd think, oh, nobody's going to help me, that kind of thing. But it's kind of it's more of a community feel to it. Um,
That's
I,
fair.
I want to learn. I want to learn real quick about more about RKE and then also the VOCA Center. But tell me about what it's like being a Christian in New York City. I live in Atlanta. It's more of a culture thing here in the Southeast. One thing is I've talking to people in New York. It's a little different up there in terms of I don't know how to put it, but it's just maybe harder, if you will. It's not cultural. It's against the norm. It's being different, countercultural, if you will. Would you agree with that?
Well, I probably push into it in a couple of different directions. So I would say, um, being a real Christian is countercultural everywhere,
Sure. Thank you.
and there's a lot of, you know, 'cause it just is, because Jesus asks us to follow him. It's not, and that almost always goes against culture. So some part of your culture, it's going to rub against it. Tim Keller, of course, from New York, used to say, like, if you really encounter Jesus, he's going to call into question all, even he's going to always call into question all parts of your life and some parts of your politics, everything. Like, there's nothing that's off the table, and so that doesn't really, so in that sense, it's like, um you could find more pushback in a superficially Christian culture in the South,
Yeah,
than
sure.
you might hear. um I think like coming out loud as a Christian in New York is a liability.
Mm.
Um, and I wouldn't do it. Like, I would say there's so many misconceptions about what it is that I tend to I tend to describe myself more as a Jesus follower now than I would as a use the word Christian, even though I think it's still a good term if it can be explained, or person of faith. One of the interesting things about New York, and so I think, and that as soon as you start to like bang a drum, then it becomes like your cause versus my cause, my identity versus your identity, that kind of thing. But at a personal level, I think as long as you're polite and curious, people don't care. I mean, people from New York are from everywhere. People from New York are into everything. It's actually a very religious city. Um, when you look at religious participation here, it is not Boston or North what Seattle or something. It's a very religious city, and there's a lot of Catholic believers here and Catholic observers here. There's a lot of Jewish people here, so and a lot of Muslims. So it's a very religious place. It's not so as long so there's sort of that in general. If you're respectful and curious, then I don't think it's a big deal in terms of that. I would say though that at another level, it's so that's sort of like the official culture. Is it an anti-Christian culture, that kind of thing? If you want to be a culture warrior here, you'll get some war, but it's not really my
If you're looking for a fight, you'll find one, right?
that's not my thing.
Yeah.
I think there's other things about New York that are challenging for people of faith. I think um we work all the time. And everybody's working all the time. So when do you get break? When do you take a Sabbath? When do you headspace? So there's that part. There's every indulgence known to man and woman is here, and it's in your face all the time. It's food and it's sex and alcohol, and weed is legal, and like everybody's joking about, like, it's New York City smells like a big pot party. Like it smells like weed all the time. And so it's like, and depending on your theology about all those things, it's kind of like, are they all bad? Maybe not. It's the indulgence, it's the addiction, it's that's what makes them bad. So that's a little bit of a sophisticated or nuanced view of those things. But the bottom line is they're around you all the time.
Oh yeah.
And there's kind of a mindset like you work really hard and you deserve it, whatever it is. You deserve that expensive meal, you deserve the expensive car ride home, you deserve, to just unwind with your favorite chemical relaxant. Like it's just that's what's here. And so it's an interesting vibe. I think the advertisements on the subways are for everything, you know. And I know because you've been here a lot, but just everything, including like use this app to find a hookup. Like that stuff is always in your face all the time. So that's sort of maybe the indulgence side.
It might be a great Instagram, I guess, channel or whatever on that, right? I was thinking about putting all the different messages I see in subways or signs in New York.
That would be a great,
right? It's like passenger shaming, if you've ever seen that before. Putting those types of things up might be kind of interesting and funny to see.
And there's one more thread on that I want to just point out, because it hit me early on when I came here. I sat down with like a guy that we kind of met, the pastor actually in the neighborhood, and our daughter babysat for him, so we got to know him. He's a great guy. He's like, "How are you feeling?" And I said, "Jake, I've never felt so behind in my whole life. Everybody I meet has a book. Everybody I meet is like done more than me. And, I live on the 11th floor of a 44 floor building. And the higher up you go, the more it costs. I live on a floor without balconies. And then I just look down and up at the people that have balconies. And there's even different elevators for different levels. And you are constantly sort of reminded of the pecking order and the achievement, I forget what David Brooks calls it, but it's like, it's the meritocracy, it's the who's done more kind of thing. And it's New York City is all about achievement and ambition. And you can in many, many cases, you can kind of size up very quickly where you rank, and it's always in your face. And so from a spiritual point of view, kind of being content with where you are, confident you're doing what God's called you to do, and not playing that comparison game. I mean, I'm sure you have it in your development when you ride down the street and you see what kind of cars parked in your neighbor's driveway. But times the data, multiply the data times 10 or even 100 here, because you're seeing it all the time, and it's hundreds of people all the time. How did they arrive at the party? The transportation, it's just everything, and it's all got dollars attached to it. at least to
Yeah.
me.
It's comparison game, right?
Yeah.
You're comparing yourself to everybody above, below, around, etc. So that's tough. So which makes me, well, I want to dovetail into this real quick here. Love to get your perspective and your counsel on then being in New York City, and obviously a Christian anywhere, but being in New York City in midst of all that you just mentioned, Chip, how does somebody live out their faith effectively?
There's a lot of, I guess it comes down to me to two things probably. Um, Rhythms, personal rhythms, and community. And you've got to have healthy spiritual rhythms that ground you in the gospel and God's story. Give you time to think and pray, and not just be manipulated by social media and everybody and all the stimulus around you.
Mm.
So you got to have that. And that includes Sabbath, which to me, it's, Jesus said we weren't made for the Sabbath. The Sabbath was made for us. So like being, he was coming against a culture that made the Sabbath unrestful. Okay. So that's what he was fighting. He wasn't fighting about the like, he wasn't saying we don't need a Sabbath. He was just saying you don't need an unrestful Sabbath with all these religious rules that just makes
Sure.
it more stressful than actually you'd be better off just going to work than following the Pharisees. But we need a rest. I mean, it's just kind of how we're made. It's a creation design that we need 24 hours of a break every week. And so when I was a pastor, it wasn't Sunday morning for me, so I did it on Monday. Like it's just
Right.
you need a Sabbath, and so that's one practice where it's like, what are the 24 hours where I'm not going to work, I'm not going to be on, I'm not going to answer emails and texts, and I'm just going to be present to myself and my wife and to my environment and to God. So that's a rhythm thing. Like there's a
Mhm.
daily rhythm, there's a weekly rhythm. So rhythms are really important, and community is really important. And and I think that's so one of the things you mentioned in my bio was the New Canaan Society, which is a Christian men's fraternity that was started in New Canaan, Connecticut, and has chapters like 50 or 60 chapters around the country. And I discovered the New York one in my transition here. People said I should go check this out. It's a good place to network. And what I found there was community.
Mhm.
I found a group of guys that were professional and funny and real and trying to follow Jesus in their their life and their vocations in and around New York City, and that group became an anchor for me uh, through this whole through their living 10 years now of living here, um, and in various different iterations. Like you really can't have community with 100 people. You need a few to go
Very
really deep.
small.
Yeah, and so there's 7 of us that meet every Tuesday and have met every Tuesday since the summer of 2020. We meet virtually because we've met. A number of us have moved on from New York, and then we get together in person once a year. And with that group, like we talk about everything, and we read spiritual things that stimulate us to be the man God wants us to be. We listen to sermons and such, uh, but we reserve our time together to talk about it and to pray for each other and talk about those things. And it's kind of to spur one another on to good deeds. I think it's from
Oh yeah.
Hebrews 10. And so I don't think you can live anywhere actually um, without rhythms and community. And I guess maybe it's funny. I would say I have some of the best personal community as a man here, and have these last 10 years of my whole life. And I've had great friends all along the journey, but having a group of 7 guys where like it's now we have years together, and memories, good and bad. Um, it's really special
Yeah,
and
it's awesome.
irreplaceable.
Irreplaceable is a really good word. It's like the old quote from John Donne, I think, said that no man is an island.
Yeah,
And that's an opportunity for us to realize that, hey, we need each other for vulnerability, uh, transparency, accountability, friendship, laughter, sharing pain, tragedy, triumph, all those things. And if you don't have that, um, if you're listening to this today, I'd encourage you to look into that and figure out what that looks like for you. Really good advice on rhythms and community on that. Hey, Chip, I want to move into real quick about the RKE Partners and the VOCA Center. If you could talk a little bit about both of those entities and your involvement in them and what your goal and objective is on that.
great. So I'll start with VOCA Center. VOCA Center is a faith-based ministry that also has a consulting or coaching arm. And the big idea with VOCA is we want to provide professional solutions to professional problems that are rooted in big biblical wisdom. And so every year we research the top issues that Christians are finding challenging at work. Also, their sources of joy. We're going to be doing that study with Barna this year, so we're really excited about that. But we have year-over-year data because we study it every year. And there's a lot of shoulds in the faith and work world, and we actually believe all of them. It's just when you start with people, you want to start with where they are, and so that's why we do this research. We turn that research into digital content, which is available 24/7 on our website, vocacenter.org. And then we invite people into a coaching relationship with a professional coach who is a sincere Christ follower. So they're trained, they're certified as coaches, and they're people, they're women and men of faith. And so that's what we do with VOCA. That's kind of the retail side. We also help Christian organizations navigate their work together as a consulting company, doing leadership development, team development, that kind of thing. But the main focus of VOCA is that retail piece of saying, as a Christian, here's my challenges. How do I navigate my work life? And then RKE Partners is a for-profit company, started with two of the other VOCA coaches. And we're a learning solutions provider. We have companies drive growth by developing their leaders. We think, in business, winning is growing. And in order to grow, your leaders need to be growth leaders. And they can be trained to be much, much more effective at that. And sometimes we work with individual leaders. Sometimes we work with senior teams, or unit teams. And sometimes it's like one at a time, and sometimes it's more enterprise. But we develop and deliver learning solutions to drive business growth at RKE. So that's our two. Those are two. They're related, but they're also different, and they're different brands and different corporate structures.
So you and I had a similar heartbeat for these things, right? From a spiritual development perspective and leadership development. I appreciate what you're doing with the team and folks that you're engaging up there in the city. That's awesome. And also, we'll put the link in the show notes so people can look and learn more about your organizations that you're involved in, Chip.
Awesome.
As we wrap up today, this part of the podcast, the episode, always want to ask our guests what maybe one takeaway might be that you want to leave with our audience. All the things we've talked about today, from your journey to living in the city and the tips you had on that, to what it's like to live out your faith in the workplace. Is there one thing that you'd want to leave with them, an emerging leader that you want to speak into them today?
Yeah, as you said that, I was just thinking, you have to get comfortable with discomfort.
What do you mean? Tell me more.
None of us are going to progress to be the women and men God's called us to be without some discomfort. And I was thinking about whether it's growing these two enterprises, which sometimes it's great and sometimes it's really, really hard and you don't know how it's going to last, or it's letting go of a comfortable, predictable situation and starting over in New York City. I think there's an element of it's uncomfortable, and there's a lot of uncertainty in it. And there's a term some sociologists use called a liminal experience, where you leave what you know, but you haven't yet discovered or defined or found the new. Like, the new is not cooked, and you're in the middle. It's like you're in the middle between one trapeze to the next. And one thing that I realized is that I love those types of experiences, but I also loathe them, because I want to know how the story is going to end. And so I think that's, it would be a shame if any of our listeners were basically missing out on kind of like the full bloom of their calling because they were hedging and being, steering away from something that's too, because of a lack of because they want to be comfortable, because they don't want to take a risk, because they need to have all the answers now. God never gives us all the answers now, and I don't think really gives us all the answers this side of eternity. I think that's why we call it faith. So it's, there's just this there's an element of mystery and uncertainty that I think is almost all that not almost. It's always part of the journey in some form. And so my answer, I think we should just embrace that and accept that. Don't look at those feelings as a sign of failure. Uh, you know, keep going, keep trusting, keep praying, keep exploring, and he'll show you what he wants you to do.
That's so good. Yeah, it's this idea of adventure.
Hmm.
I'm part of a great adventure. That's the old Stephen Curtis Chapman song, a throwback on
But
that,
it
if you
is
will.
an old Stephen Curtis Chapman song.
But the point there is that this life is an adventure. If you have the mindset, the heart posture that that's what this is, and take risks and appreciate the discomfort, because that's where the growth happens. Talk about that with people all the time. So powerful. So thank you, Chip, on that. So let's move to the next section as we wrap up the podcast interview. It's okay. We're gonna move into the hot seat. Here we go. You ready?
Yep.
All right. So what's your favorite go-to comfort food?
Hmm. Fred's custom mac and cheese on the Upper West Side.
What makes that so special? You sound like a connoisseur of mac and cheese.
Well, I'm not necessarily, but there's this restaurant up there, 83rd Street in Amsterdam, where they customize your mac and cheese so you can put ham, bacon, and pork in
Wow.
your if you're so inclined. So they have all these options, and so it's absolutely delicious.
Talk about a discomfort zone. Very good. All right. Let's see if you could have, speaking of a meal, if you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be and why?
I think his name was John Robison. He built the Brooklyn Bridge, and his wife, and I think that's one of those journeys where it was really hard. It wasn't clear if it's going to work, even though he thought it would. And his dad was the engineer, and then he just passed away, and he had to carry on. Like, I think that's a fascinating story, and I'd love to meet him.
Yeah, that's a great. And I think one of my daughter or my wife has read the book about that thing, and neat story. Actually, it's fun. Carla and Caroline and I all rode our bikes over the Brooklyn Bridge. So if you haven't had a chance to do that, being in the New York City area, that's a wonderful thing to do. All right, let's tune into music real quick here. What's the first concert that you ever attended?
It was probably a guy named Phil Keggy.
Great guitar player
Yeah,
and was missing a finger, as I
yeah,
recall.
that's right. Yeah, amazing guy.
Oh, that's an amazing guy. Absolutely. Okay. If you could instantly become an expert in anything, what would it be?
Selling.
Selling. Why selling?
It is the absolute kind of governor. You know, it's the choke point, the governor on our whole enterprise. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Making things happen.
yeah.
Nothing happens until it's sold.
That's
That's
right.
what we said at Coke,
Yeah.
right? It's got to be sold in on it. Okay. Are you a morning person or a night owl?
Morning.
Okay. What's your favorite book to recommend to others?
It all depends on who they are and what. There's not a
No
single
favorite book.
what. Well, I have lots
No
of favorite
favorite book.
books. It's like,
Yeah.
but it's just a question of who they are. I,
What are you reading right now?
what am I reading right now? I just finished a book called The Breakthrough Company,
Okay.
which is like good to great for startups that broke through and became billion-dollar companies.
Let's see. If you could live in any city for a year, which one would it be? Not New York City, not the Philly area, somewhere else.
London or Rome?
Ooh, both great cities. Wonderful. What's the most adventurous thing that Chip Roper has ever done?
I really think moving my family to New York City when I was 46 years old in mid-career was the craziest and most adventurous thing I've ever done.
That's talk about discomfort, right?
Yeah.
Stretching, uncomfortable, and all that. So you're to be applauded for doing that. Sounds, and I know things have worked out well, so that's good. Hasn't been easy, but good. Let's see. What's your favorite way to unwind after a long day?
Get a glass of my favorite bourbon and just sit in the living room and look at the lights of the city.
Yeah, man.
And I'm,
Because you live across the river, right? So you
yes,
can look at Manhattan and do all that. So
yeah.
that's awesome. What a view. Two more here. What's the best piece of advice that you have ever received?
So one of my mentors, he was a pastor. Carl Green he basically said, just go into any new situation and serve, and you will find that you rise to the top.
So that means like it just simply differentiates you by serving other people.
Yeah.
That's so true. So true. So many people, to your point, as we talked earlier, are self-absorbed, self-serving.
Mm-hmm.
If you can serve other people, look toward their needs, help them meet those, it makes a world of difference, not only for them, but also for you, right?
Totally.
That's so true. Really good. Hey, last one. This is fun because I prepped you on this already. When we had dinner with you and Audrey when we were in New York, Carl and I, before I spoke at the NCS, the New Canaan Society there in Manhattan, you shared a great story with us. And the question is, what's something that we may not know about Chip Roper?
I had a mullet.
You had a mullet.
I had a mullet because I was in a band. So that's
So if you wait a second. So let's paint the picture right now. You don't have a mullet now. You've got
no,
a
I don't
great,
have enough hair
great.
to produce a mullet. Maybe with the right treatment, Preston. After I get my fee for this podcast, maybe I can go out and get the right treatment for my hair.
Very good. With the fee you're going to get, you might be able to just get a haircut.
Yeah,
A
I
couple,
don't.
maybe.
Yeah,
We'll see.
yeah.
Right? Not
Just
all
kidding.
of them.
Yeah, so I
Tell
was,
me
it was
about
in a band.
Yeah, tell me about the band, the mullet, real quick. I want to hear about that.
I mean, I don't know where it came from, but since I was like in junior high, I wanted to be in a rock band and be a famous rock star. So, um, and by the time I graduated high school, we had a band and we were playing in coffee houses and stuff, and did a bit of the bar scene during college. It's where I met my wife. My one of my best friends, Michael, who's in that group of guys that meets every week. So it was fun.
And
It kept us out of trouble.
yeah, a little bit, right? Got you into some trouble too, I bet. And so, hence, you play keyboard at the church too. You said earlier on, right?
Yeah,
So
right,
that's
right.
what you did. So on the keyboard. So, hey, you've been a great guest today, Chip, and thank you for all your insights. I want to tell you how much I am thankful for you. You invited me to come speak to the NCS there in Manhattan back in June. And I'm doing a Jerk to Joy tour. And so, based on your recommendation, I'm going to get to go to a few other chapters around the country, whether it's in New
That's awesome.
Jersey, in the Connecticut area. I'm going to be actually in Detroit in November, and then also Winston-Salem, North Carolina, over the next couple months. So, if you're listening and would like to have me come and engage your group, I'd love to do that. Also, if you want to connect with me, you can find me on LinkedIn, or you'll be able to sign up for my weekly email, which has some leadership thoughts on that. I'm Preston Poore. This is PQ. Take care. Talk soon.